From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The migrant caravan in Mexico is traveling towards the north. Despite the challenges they face, they press on.
In the early hours of the morning, the caravan gets ready to leave the Guadalajara shelter, but not before they repay the favor to their hosts.
We do what we know and can, which is cleaning. The place was so clean when we arrived, so we must leave it clean.
A fleet of buses is waiting for them to drive them closer to the border with Nayarit.
Slow, slow, be careful and have a nice ride.
Nayarit is still recovering from the devastation of Hurricane Villa, so much that the shelters there are still full and can't accommodate many more people.
They've helped us a lot in Guadalajara, and they've even brought transport. No other state has done that.
The migrants will be dropped off 90 miles away from where they have to get their next lift, as it's a difficult route.
Whatever happens later, it is the responsibility of the governor of the place where we were before.
Their spirits are soon raised when they arrive at the Ixtal del Rio and see the transport that awaits to take them to Sinaloa. Despite the obstacles, the caravan traveled across 2 Mexican states in only one day.
Our correspondent in Sinaloa, Pablo Perez, has more on the report.
We are right now at the La Concha phytosanitary station. This is the place where the migrant caravan arrived yesterday, because there are still over 800 that are on their way from the state of Nayarit. And here, the people of Sinaloa have received them, fed them, and treated them medically. But there's a problem that Sinaloa also has been struck by Hurricane Willa, so they're heavily damaged, and they have their own casualties. So they say they cannot take care either of the migrant caravan, but they are collaborating with buses that are leaving this place, and they are taking them all the way to the next state, Sonora, and that's a long ride. It's 690 kilometers. That will be a record distance for the migrant caravan in only one day, but they're not doing it all together, but in small quantities. So far, they tell us that 1,200 have left this point since yesterday, and they are continuously leaving this place in 40 people groups, all the way to Navojoa, Sonora, which will be their next stop.
The Senate in Argentina is scheduled to vote on the 2019 budget bill on Wednesday afternoon. The project has already been approved in the lower house, but there have been heavy protests against the budget for several weeks. Protesters say that this budget will harm economically vulnerable people, and that issues like food shortages can no longer be tolerated. President Mauricio Macri needs this budget to be approved to maintain the agreement with the International Monetary Fund.
Mostly it's a budget that includes a lot of cuts. In the broader sense, yeah, it's a big expenditure cut from what we have been having as a budget these past few years. And that's why it's being so rejected by many political and social organizations around the country, because it cuts on social expenditure, it cuts on infrastructure investment, it cuts on almost everywhere where they could cut. In that sense, it's part of a broader program that's been, proposed and accepted by the government and the IMF. The IMF is making sure that we can pay the debt. The rest of the expenditure doesn't doesn't matter that much to them, and that's why they are cutting everywhere where they can. The intention is to get to a zero 1% deficit next year. I mean, a balanced budget, which we will see if they can. And this is only the primary budget. I mean, the equilibrium, the balance, won't take into account the payment of the debt. That will still be something for what we will need financing.
Our correspondent in Argentina, Edgardo Esteban, has more details.
The debate continues in the Senate over the 2019 budget, which has caused a lot of turmoil among the people because of the ongoing recession and the adjustment measures it will bring. This budget is a direct response to the demands of the agreement between the government of Mauricio Macri and the International Monetary Fund. The debate is expected to last 12 hours. The government has guaranteed the necessary number of votes to approve the budget, a vote that will happen close to midnight. There is a lot of tension and high expectations. Protests are ongoing outside of the Senate in rejection of this bill, which will affect the most vulnerable sectors in Argentina.
Thank you, Edgardo, for that report. Cuba has announced it is pulling out of the program whereby it supplied doctors to poor communities in Brazil. Some 20,000 Cuban doctors and medical staff have worked in Brazil as part of the More Doctors program. It was set up by then-President Dilma Rousseff of the Workers' Party in 2013, in conjunction with the Pan American Health Organization. The Cuban government said that President-elect Jair Bolsonaro has insulted the Cuban doctors and promised to change the terms of the program. Brazil's former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is being questioned in court today in a second alleged corruption case. Lula's supporters gathered to wish him a good day outside the prison in Curitiba, where he is already serving a 12-year sentence. They say this new case, known as the Atibaia case, is just another attempt to use the courts to keep the former president out of political life. Trade unions, the landless movement, and Workers' Party lawmakers are all accompanying Lula to the court. Earlier, we spoke with our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Meir, about the latest development for Lula da Silva.
Moro's accepting this political position in the Bolsonaro government is a clear sign of conflict of interest. And so, in a way to diffuse or defragment energy that's being put on this from all over the world on this conflict of interest, they just brought to push forward another case against Lula, which was originally filed about 2 years ago. The charges are even more frivolous than the charges related to the triplex apartment in Guarujá.
The British cabinet has backed a draft Brexit deal that was agreed with the European Union. According to an announcement made by Prime Minister Theresa May after a 5-hour cabinet meeting, they reached a collective decision to accept the agreement and outline a political declaration.
The collective decision of Cabinet was that the government should agree the draft withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration. This is a decisive step which enables us to move on and finalise the deal in the days ahead.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The ongoing trial of murder on Honduran indigenous leader Berta Caceres, which was originally postponed last week to be restarted on Tuesday, resumed on Monday, with authorities failing to inform the victim's family or the press. We're being joined live by Silvio Carrillo, a journalist and filmmaker living in Oakland, California. He's also Berta Caceres' nephew. Hi, Silvio. Thank you for joining us. We know this case has been full of irregularities from the start. What do you think the family was not informed about the latest change? What does this say about the overall process?
It's simply a pattern by the government that continues to this day. The U.S. Embassy has said that they believe in this U.S. government can handle this case. Clearly, there's no political will to do so. This is just more evidence of everything we've been saying, that this government is maybe involved in her murder. We don't know, but they certainly should not be taking up this case. They don't have the capacity nor the political will, because so many wealthy individuals who are part of the government might be involved, as well as the army and many state actors. And it's unclear whether they really want justice or not in Honduras, and we don't believe that's the case.
Now, Silvio, can you tell us why it would have been crucial for family members to be present at this hearing?
Yeah, the hearing, I mean, each and every day is of vital importance to us, because someone has to keep tabs on what is happening in the courtroom. And the fact that they didn't tell us is serious. Is a serious violation. So serious, in fact, that even the U.S. Embassy, the representative of the U.S., who has been going to each and every hearing, wasn't there, wasn't even told, and they were pretty upset about it. And they said that they would speak to the government about it. And you know, it is a clear violation of due process.
Now, the hearing lasted 6 hours. Do you know anything about the outcome of it?
We know that they heard evidence about conversations by one of the main figures charged, one of the planners potentially, Sergio Bustillo, I believe it was, and it was about phone conversations he had. I attended one of the previous court hearings, and they went over some of the conversations that others, some of the wealthy family that owns the dam had, and how they were being very reckless and very threatening towards my family, towards Berta. So I can only imagine what these conversations were about, that they talked about in the hearing. I mean, it was crucial evidence regardless, and every day there's more and more crucial evidence coming out, but the government just doesn't want it spread or shared.
Thank you so much, Silvio, for talking to us today. That was Silvio Carrillo from Oakland, California. Meanwhile, dozens of indigenous leaders have gathered in Colombia's capital, Bogota, to demand the government fulfill its guarantees of peace and protection in times of conflict.
Members of indigenous communities from the department of Chocó arrived in Bogotá, demanding a solution to the ongoing violence they have to endure.
Over 4,000 members of our communities have been detained since the signing of the peace agreement. Nearly 2,000 of us have been displaced all over the country.
Territorial control by the ELN and right-wing paramilitary groups, as well as the growth of illegal economies, has contributed to the escalation of violence, especially in the Valle del Cauca and Nariño and Chocó regions.
We are finding illegal lumbers, illegal mining operations. There is blackmailing of local mines. There is armed trafficking, drug trafficking, and even people trafficking.
Experts argue for the government to implement effective policies to tackle this humanitarian crisis, policies that will develop and empower indigenous communities, not marginalize them further.
Sometimes the single policy of sending the military is not accompanied by other policies that would help communities. There are no attempts to eradicate illegal crops. There is no help to be given so that we may learn better agricultural practices.
These communities continue to live under threat and feel very unsettled. Even their daily lives are at risk because they face landmines and the murders of their leaders.
7 of our friends were recently killed, including a teacher and one of our governors.
The indigenous peoples of Chocó insist that they won't leave Bogotá until the government lives up to its promises.
Colombian President Iván Duque has passed his 100th day in office. During this time, many have claimed he has done enough for the issues that plague the country. Our correspondent in Bogotá, José Manuel Jiménez, brings us more.
100 days after President Iván Duque took office, experts believe he has not issued economic, political, or even legal proposals to help Colombia. Duque's reforms have been seriously questioned by both Congress and the people. Even the ruling party has criticized his reforms. During his time in office, there have been numerous protests by students, indigenous and social organizations. 183 social leaders have been killed in 2018 alone, and during the last 100 days, there have been around 40 killings of social leaders with no government response. The peace process and the dialogues with ELN remain in standby, and the international community has continuously criticized the Colombian government for this. Iván Duque has also avoided talks with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. The latest scandal to rock his presidency was the poisoning of Alejandro Pizano, who was a key witness in the Odebrecht bribery scandal. All in all, Duque's first 100 days in office have left many Colombians disappointed, as his government doesn't seem to be doing much to put an end to the many conflicts that plague the country.
The Attorney General in Colombia has been accused yet again of corruption, this time related to bribes paid by the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. He is now being pressured to resign.
Jorge Enrique Pizano was a key witness in the Odebrecht corruption scandal. Before he died, he gave a local media channel several audios that could prove that the current Attorney General, Néstor Humberto Martínez, knew about the bribery scheme since 2015.
Since you managed to win the battle with those bastards from Odebrecht, now we don't know what we got ourselves into. We don't know if they are giving money to the paramilitaries or if they are stealing it themselves, those bastards. We don't know if they are paying bribes to foreign governments or to the Colombian government.
According to the audios, the lawyer of Corfi Colombiana had detailed information about the irregularities in contracts and the relations with the paramilitary groups.
In several countries, presidents and vice presidents have fallen because of Odebrecht. When they were about to arrest Marcelo Odebrecht Martínez as a legal advisor to that company, had information about the corrupt activities taking place, either with bribes or with funding for the paramilitaries.
Senator Jorge Enrique Robledo accuses the Colombian elite of appointing Martínez as Attorney General to avoid any investigation into these big companies.
President Juan Manuel Santos, who put Martínez there, is protected. So is Iván Duque. If it wasn't like that, they would have been accused. Álvaro Uribe, Andrés Pastrana, and César Gaviria are also protected.
Robledo points to the accusations that Odebrecht financed the presidential campaigns of Santos, of Iván Zuluaga, and the current president Iván Duque. The investigations into this went nowhere.
What is happening is a disgrace. The country is falling apart. The elite has no consideration for the country. It's embarrassing.
The Attorney General has also been accused of hiding assets abroad and putting money in tax havens.
There are legal values, as well as ethical and political ones involved here. The Attorney General should step aside.
Congress has announced a debate on the issue, but many are calling on the Attorney General to resign immediately.
The public prosecutor has confirmed that Alejandro Pizano, son of key witness Jorge Enrique, was poisoned. Alejandro was killed by drinking poisoned water after he attended the funeral of his father. Authorities first thought he died of natural reasons, but the public prosecutor confirmed otherwise after an investigation. The Chilean Congress has approved President Sebastián Piñera's controversial Safe Classrooms law with over 100 votes in favor.
This is not Iraq. This is a public school in Santiago de Chile. The police are preparing to burst into a high school and fight students. There is now a law that allows such actions. Just a few weeks before the school year is set to end, the Safe Classroom bill will finally turn into a law.
Opposition parties were generally in favor of this project. In the end, we could see how they turned into part of the problem and not of the solution for communities.
A lack of decent bathrooms and even classrooms. the absence of teachers, poor infrastructure, low resources. All of this shows the decay of public education. Abandoned by the government, the students decided to take to the streets, but the answer they received was violent repression from the state.
It seems the state is the only one that can act aggressively, and it's not only violence what they use. There have been reports of sexual abuse, so this is actually escalating. The people call the law the Safe Cage Project.
Despite the changes that were made to the project, like not expelling violent students as a precautionary measure, the repression that treats students as if they were criminals still remains.
This harms not only student organizations, it also harms their right to decide. So our call is to reject this law and fight for our demands instead.
Public education activists say they will keep fighting against the government's violence.
If their main goal is to cover up a faulty education system by implementing daily stigmatization and repression against students, then this new law is the best way to achieve it. Now the remaining question is, who are the true enemies here? Public education or democracy in this country?
In the following days, this controversial project will become a law, and many expect that when it does, schools will only face even more repression.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza agreed to a new ceasefire brokered by Egypt. However, they only agreed to halt the cross-border attacks that have intensified over the last hours if the Israeli forces do the same. Gaza residents celebrate the ceasefire in the streets. Meanwhile, the Israeli Minister of Defense has resigned in protest against the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. At a news conference, Avigdor Lieberman said that the ceasefire and the attempts to reach a truce will be similar to surrounding to terror. His resignation could lead to the dissolution of the Israeli parliament. Lieberman also criticized the decision to allow Qatar to transfer $50 million to Gaza. Residents of Fiji have gone to the polls for the island's nation's second election since a military coup in 2006. Current Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama, who led the bloodless coup in 2006, is expected to keep his position against a divided opposition. Since 2006, Fiji has seen considerable improvements in the economy, environmental policies, and minority rights. And yet, human rights organizations say there are still many rights restrictions as well as ongoing issue of police brutality. And now let's take a look at some other news from around the world.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to speed up talks towards a peace treaty based on a 1956 agreement. The two countries have yet to formally end hostilities after World War II, as they have been disputing the Southern Kuril Islands captured by Soviet troops at the time. The talks are expected to continue at the upcoming G20 summit in Buenos Aires. Workers in Greece started a 24-hour strike on Wednesday to demand an increase of salaries and pensions. The strike was organized by one of the country's largest unions and is the first major protest since the country abandoned its bailout scheme in August 2018. The wages of public sector workers have dropped by up to 40% since Greece first sought a financial bailout in 2010.
Our lives over the last few years after 2010, when the first, second and third bailouts were implemented, have suffered deep wounds, both in terms of our financial, social and personal lives.
Lawmakers at the European Union have backed the bloc's first ever cuts on carbon dioxide emissions from trucks, setting an expectation for at least a 35% reduction in CO2 levels by 2030. The EU currently has no restrictions on heavy-duty vehicles, even though they make up almost 1/4 of the region's transport-related emissions. The 28 member states have yet to agree on the final law, which will be debated at the end of December.
Cambodia has broken a Guinness World Record for building the largest dragon boat. The boat is 83 meters long and 1.94 meters wide. It is made of hardwood with an artistic Asian design, and it is capable of carrying 179 rowers. More than 14,000 Cambodians have taken almost 200 days to build this boat. The previous record was set by China in 2016. And we come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.